Hi, everyone. I'm Hazel Remish. I'm one of the supervising attorneys in our housing practice group at Legal Aid. And I am leading the Right to Counsel work. I'm really excited that you're all taking the time to watch this video and are willing to help us with the Right to Counsel pre-screening, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Lauren, who's going to talk us through Legal Server and some of the logistics.
Thanks, Hazel. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Gilbride. I am the managing attorney of our Intake and Volunteer Lawyers program. Thank you all for joining us and watching this presentation to learn how you can help the Legal Aid Society and our clients that are facing eviction in the city of Cleveland. I'm going to be talking you through the logistics of accessing our case management system, which is called Legal Server. So when you are doing this work, you will be accessing our system from your own home computer. We will be giving you a username and password so that you can access the case management system, and you will actually be entering information in about people that you're meeting with through the Right to Counsel project and work that you're doing. And that information will be shared with the Legal Aid Society and with our intake department to make determinations about clients that can be eligible for Right to Counsel. So this is really important work. We are really, really excited to have you join us. And we want to make sure that we're giving you a lot of information that can help you when you're doing this work on your own. So I'm going to share my screen and walk you through a PDF that we've created. It's a cheat sheet that you can use. We will send an email out to those of you that continue along and want to participate in this project. But for now, let me just pull that up. Hold on one second. Okay, so this is the cheat sheet for the Legal Aid Society login. As I mentioned, the system that you're logging into is Legal Server. It is a case management system that contains information about all of our clients. You will have a limited amount of access. Most of what you will be able to see is just information about the person that you are currently speaking with through the Right to Counsel program. This is a link that you can use to access the case management system. It can be accessed from any web browser. But we do recommend that you do not use Internet Explorer. It's not typically used anymore, but Legal Server does not function well within Explorer. You can use Edge, Chrome, Firefox, any of those, and they will work just fine. You are going to get a login, as I said. As you commit to working through this project, we will create individual logins for people. So we will give you the login. It is typically the first initial and your last name, unless there are multiple people, so there may be multiple R. Smiths in our system, and we could potentially be giving you a username of R. Smith 2 or something along those lines. We'll let you know if that's the situation, but just so that you know that the typical way that we name our users. And then we will set a password for you. And the initial login, we will give you a kind of a dummy password. You can use that to log in, and then you'll be prompted to change your password on first login. We always recommend that you do not save your Legal Server password or any passwords really in your browser, but that you log in and you must enter your password every time you're going to access Legal Server. Once you log in, you will see an option to begin a pre-screen, and pre-screen is the term that we use to describe the work that you're doing with the clients from Right to Counsel. Hazel is going to give us more information about the pre-screen and actually take you step by step through everything that you're going to do when speaking with the clients. But I just wanted to point out that that's what you will be doing when you access Legal Server. And in just a moment, I'll log in and show you how that works. As I mentioned before, once a pre-screen is complete, you cannot go back to it. So you want to make sure you review and confirm information before completing it. The other really important piece of your work with us is making sure that you track your time in Legal Server. And we ask people to track their time for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons that we ask people to track their time is because it's really important for us to be able to evaluate the work that we're doing and the work that we're asking volunteers to do, and take a look at the time that people are spending and what results from that time. And so that, everyone that works for the Legal Aid Society tracks their time in our case management system, and all of our volunteers are asked to also track their time in the case management system. Plus, it's a really good way for you to be able to gauge how much work you're doing for legal aid and for our clients. I will again go into some details about how to track your time, but again, this PDF will be really helpful when you're sitting there on your first day and you're trying to figure out, what did she tell me I need to do? Just look here, and it really takes you step by step through what you need to find to be able to enter your time for the work that you're doing. And I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. The time slip that you're going to use is the volunteer other legal work time. It's used for any volunteer time spent for legal aid that cannot be attributed to a specific case. And that's what we are going to be using to track this right to counsel work. And then this is what the time slip will actually look like. Legal aid records our time in 6-minute increments, but you only need to add one time slip for the entire time that you're doing a right to counsel session for any given day. So most of the time you'll be recording time closer to like 1 hour increments, but just so that you know, for every 6 minutes, it's a 0.1. So if you were only spending 18 minutes with us for some reason, you would still create a time slip, but your time spent would just be 0.3. And if you have any questions about this, once you start working on it, we're going to be available to answer those questions for you. There will be a Q&A session that you can ask these questions, but I just want to make sure that we're showing you everything that you need to know as you are getting ready to assist us with right to counsel work. Again, this is what the time slip looks like. You will select yourself as the caseworker. That's why everyone has individual login information. Your volunteer type, this is a drop-down menu. You are a law student. Most of you are law students. There are other options if you are not a law student and you are doing this work. Your date of service is the actual day that you were doing the right to counsel work. So if you are doing it on a Thursday and a Friday, but for some reason you don't create the time slip until Friday, you can go back into this date of service and change it to Thursday. Sometimes I have questions about if you can do like multiple days in one time slip. You cannot. So you would need to do a time slip for every day that you are doing the right to counsel work. And that, again, the time spent is one. The activity type, I will show you what that is. It's not actually, we're not going to have you select intake. There's case supervision, casework supervision, and program management that you would select, and I'll show you that. The funding code is going to default to this. Again, this is all internal Legal Aid Society information, but really important that you select the information that we're providing here. So that's the funding code. And then the program you're going to select is Right to Counsel, and the county you'll select is Cuyahoga, because this work is being done in Cuyahoga County. You do not need to worry about this LSC regulations question. That's an internal question about our funder. And then you're going to fill out this activity summary. And this information is just for us to know what you were doing during that time. You do not need to list all of the clients or potential clients that you spoke with, or really go deeply into the work that you were doing. It just needs to be an overview of what you did during that day. And typically it's going to be that you sat in on someone's docket and completed pre-screens. The other time requirements that we just want to make sure that you know about: you must submit your time by Friday or you must complete your time by Friday of the week that the time is completed. The program should always be Right to Counsel. The funding code should always be 0 LSCOAJF, and the county should always be Cuyahoga. So we're trying to make this as easy as possible for you all when you're completing the time. And now I'm just going to quickly log into Legal Server so that you can see what exactly I'm talking about and you feel comfortable with that information. So hold on one second. Oh, you know what? I'm going to log out and log back in. So you'll enter your username. Again, it's going to typically be first initial, last name, but we'll give everyone their own unique username and let you know what it is. And then you'll enter your password. Sorry. And do not save your password. As I said, this is your home screen. This is what you'll always see when you're logging in, because this is a test user account. You will not ever see a case assigned to you. If you ever did, you should let someone know, because that shouldn't be happening. So you wouldn't see a case assigned to you. The area that you're really going to be focused on is this right to counsel pre-screen. That's going to be what you select when you come in to do the work and speak with the clients. One tip that I like to give people is this little blue and white puzzle piece sometimes accidentally gets hit, and then you think, oh my goodness, the right to counsel pre-screen is gone. I can't do the work that I'm supposed to do. You just want to click it again and it reopens it. So as I said, Hazel will go into the right to counsel pre-screen, but this is where it's located. This is really the only place that you'll be coming besides timekeeping. The place that you'll add time is very simple. You go to this timekeeping tab up here, you select that. And then you go to this actions menu, and this is all in the PDF, and you would add volunteer case time. So you select that. And then there's that case slip that we talked about. So you can go in and add the information about the, excuse me, not that, I'm sorry, that is not the time slip you want to use. You want to go to add volunteer other legal work time, excuse me. And then you don't have to enter any information about cases. So you would select yourself. So I would start typing in my name and it'll pull up anyone that has that name. Volunteer type is, you would select law student. Date of service is the date you were actually doing the work for right to counsel. This start and end time, you could use it. It calculates the total amount of time, but I think most people are able to do that on their own. So say you're sitting on a docket this morning for 2 hours, your time spent would be 2, and your activity type would be legal work, practice group, or program management. There you go. Your funding code, again, like we said, is that LSC code. Your program code is always going to be right to counsel for this work. Even if you sit on the docket and you don't talk to any right to counsel clients, you're doing the work for right to counsel. So that's what you want to always select as your program. And your county is going to be Cuyahoga. Again, this is where you can add a note, sat in on Magistrate Roberts docket at 9 a.m. Something very simple. And then you would hit continue. And that will save that information. And then you'll see there that you have that time slip sat in on Magistrate Roberts docket at 9 a.m. And that shows you all the time slips that you entered for any given week. So you can come in and just make sure that you've added all of the time information that you need to add in order to report your information correctly to legal aid. So that is Legal Server in a nutshell. It's pretty easy to use. As I said, there's not much that you'll be touching. So hopefully it's pretty simple. If you have any issues with your login, once we give you your username and password, welcome to reach out to me. Any questions about time entry or other issues that you're running into, you can reach out to me, Hazel, or Lauren, who will be joining you all for a Q&A session after you've watched this video. So that is all I have to share with you, but I am going to turn this now over to Hazel so that she can take you through the pre-screen and give you more information about our right to counsel work.
Thanks, Lauren. So I too am going to share my screen. I'm going to break down my presentation into 3 parts. One, I want to give sort of a background about right to counsel generally, just so you guys sort of understand how critical this work is, a brief introduction about the process of evictions in Cleveland Housing Court, and then we'll do the actual pre-screen so you know what to expect when you're meeting with a client, and sort of give you some tips on how to do that. So I'm gonna share my screen. So, I mean, this is just our legal aid and what our mission is. It's essentially to secure justice and resolve fundamental problems for those who are low income and vulnerable by providing high quality legal services and working for systemic solutions. And when we're talking about right to counsel, we really are talking about systemic solutions. It's something that has really impacted the whole ecosystem of evictions. So as some of you might know, in order for a landlord to start an eviction action against a tenant, they're required to give an eviction notice. That is the first step. And after that, the landlord usually has to wait 3 days before they can go ahead and file an eviction action in housing court. Cleveland in particular is a court of special jurisdiction and can hear eviction cases under a variety of circumstances. And so what ends up happening usually is that once the landlord files the eviction, the court will schedule the hearing 30 days out. And that hearing is the trial. That's the trial date. That's what the opportunity that people have to appear in court. And that's where you guys are going to be participating. Oftentimes you'll see through the hearing process that a landlord and a tenant will ask to go out to mediation. That is something that's available through the court. So I just wanted to put this on the screen so you knew what was happening. And then oftentimes after that eviction hearing, a judgment is entered. So the court makes a decision about whether or not that tenant is allowed to continue to live in that unit and retain possession of the property. So that's a sort of overall eviction process. What you guys are going to be participating in is the actual eviction hearing. So a couple of things. Since the pandemic, Cleveland Housing Court has been doing everything via Zoom. And so all the hearings are via Zoom. And you will see that the magistrates are hearing the cases and they're asking certain questions of the tenants. One of the questions is whether they have a child in the household. And the reason for that is that Cleveland passed a right to counsel ordinance in October of 2019. The ordinance became effective July 1st, and that is the work that we are doing now, implementing that ordinance. However, the ordinance is limited in that it only applies to tenants who have a child in the household and are at 100% of the federal poverty level. And so that is the reason why you will hear magistrates say, do you have a child in the household? And if the answer is yes, the magistrate will ask who is here to do RTC screening or pre-screening, and that is where you all will come in. The court will put you and the tenant out into a breakout room on Zoom where you'll have an opportunity to ask the tenant certain questions to determine whether or not they're eligible for legal aid representation pursuant to this ordinance. And just this slide in particular, just wanted you all to know, we're doing a lot of outreach to tenants in order for them to catch them prior to their hearing. So sometimes you'll hear on the docket, if the landlord asks or the tenant asks, might tell you that they've already reached out to legal aid. That's because they have already received some sort of information prior to their hearing that tells them about the availability of right to counsel. So I just wanted you to be aware that the first interaction that they might have had with legal aid might not necessarily be the interaction that you are engaging with them on the docket. And then this slide in particular, and we will circulate both the PowerPoint and all of the materials that we're sharing today, really talks about how critical this work is. And I just wanted to highlight one particular statistic. So in the first 6 months that Right to Counsel launched, we were able to avoid eviction or involuntary move for 93% of the tenants who we helped and closed their case out in the first 6 months. So that is really systemic change and really impacting our community. And then just some things to remember for screening of right to counsel. So you're going to ask the tenant first if they have contacted legal aid in the past, if they knew about the right to counsel program prior to their participation in that hearing on the day that you're speaking to them, and if so, what prevented them from contacting us ahead of their hearing. The tenant has to have a minor child in the household, but keep in mind that the minor child does not have to be biological. So it could be a grandchild, it could be a nephew, a niece. It does not have to be a biological child. The child also does not have to live there 100% of the time. So oftentimes you'll see somebody who potentially will say, well, yes, like my child lives with me, but they're only here on the weekends. That would still suffice in order for them to be eligible for right to counsel. Because you guys are law students, or most of you will be law students, you do not want to give the tenant any advice or anything that could be considered legal advice. You really want to steer clear of this. You don't want to be practicing or engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. One of the questions that you'll see when we walk through the pre-screen, the actual process is, what is the income that the person has? Keep in mind that income isn't solely employment income. It could be things like unemployment, child support, alimony, SSI, disability benefits. Anything can categorize as income for these purposes. And they must have an active first cause case. So that means that they must have an active eviction case, which generally at the point that you are meeting them, they are going to have an active eviction case. And then here's just information on how to connect with legal aid. RTC intake specifically has its own phone line, legal aid's website, or the Right to Counsel website as well, which is freeevictionhelp.org. Keep in mind, legal aid is not doing walk-ins yet because of COVID. And so that's just information that might be helpful, because a lot of times tenants will ask, well, how can I get a hold of somebody after they're done with their hearing? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen and then go through a couple of tips first on the court process, and then I will actually pull up Legal Server so you guys see what I'm talking about. So a couple of things to keep in mind. As I mentioned, all eviction hearings are being handled on Zoom. The court gives legal aid the Zoom links for the entire month, usually via email. Some practical tips to keep in mind: you should mute your microphone when you're not speaking on the docket. You want to have your video on. You want the court to see you. You want to dress court appropriate, because even though it's Zoom and it feels sort of informal, we're still representing legal aid. You want to name yourself appropriately. So on Zoom, you can change your name. So you want it to say RTC Rep, Legal Aid, and then your name. And we'll give you instructions on how to do that as well. Some magistrates will ask the defendant or the tenant on their own if they have children in the household. In those instances, the magistrate will have a follow-up question of whether they want to talk to legal aid, and if so, they will place you and the defendant tenant in a breakout room. At that point, you'll go through the screening process, which we're going to cover in a second. But if the hearing is proceeding and the magistrate has not asked the defendant if there are children in the household, it is okay for you to politely interrupt and address your question to the magistrate. And we will give you language, but you should say something along the lines of, "Excuse me, Your Honor, I'm so-and-so with right to counsel. Could the court ask the defendant if there are children in the household?" Do not directly speak to the defendant at that point. Don't pose the question directly to them. Don't ask the defendant directly if they have a child in the household. Let the court do that. This is normally not an issue, but you should feel comfortable politely interrupting the magistrate at an appropriate time. Also, keep in mind that there are usually a lot of RTC attorneys that are on the docket. So if you need help, any of them will you'll see them on the docket. They'll be identified as legal aid attorneys. Any of them can assist with any questions that you might have during that time. Some other tips to keep in mind is that, if the defendant or the tenant says that there is at least one child in the household, the magistrate will pause the proceeding to send you to the breakout room. But if the defendant indicates that there is not a child in the household, the hearing will proceed to a full, eviction hearing trial. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up Legal Server and share my screen. You guys will give me just 1 minute. That's showing legal server. Okay, so as Lauren showed you guys, you're gonna see right here on the left-hand column, it says right to counsel pre-screen. You're gonna start off by asking the person what is their name, middle initial, and last name. Always double check that you have that spelled correctly. A lot of times we end up going back to this information to look at the docket on the court docket to see when is their next hearing or information about their eviction case. The next couple of questions are about how to contact the person. Zip code, address, really important. But the most important thing on this particular screen is their phone number and their email address and whether we can text them. So as you will see, I'm gonna walk through this. If I put a phone number in here, is the mobile phone safe? Hopefully the person says yes. And you're gonna ask them whether we have their consent to text message them. This is really important because a lot of times our clients are not necessarily available during office hours when we call, so we will text, and that is a really good way for us to get a hold of them. So always double check the phone number, make sure that you got that right, that we can text them, and an email address, and whether it's safe for us to email them. And then it's gonna take you down to this section here. So as you will see, some of the, you'll have to put in the last name of the magistrate who is hearing your case to the extent that you have that available. Legal problem code is always gonna be around 60s, in the 60s. So it's either gonna be federally subsidized housing, private landlord tenant, or public housing. A lot of times, the way that you'll ask the question is, do you know if you have a voucher or if you have Section 8 or anything like that? Or is your relationship with your landlord, do you pay your rent in its entirety? And depending on how the tenant answers that question, so you'll select here. So let me pause here for a second and sort of explain the differences. So federally subsidized housing will be things like if the person has a voucher or some sort of subsidy. And you would select that there. If they say, no, I pay my whole rent, it's just, a private landlord, then you would select private landlord tenants. And then public housing is where the housing authority is actually the landlord. So in this instance, you will hear like, well, I live in CMHA housing or in Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority housing. Don't worry too much about this because intake will always double check this. So if you get it wrong, it's not a big deal. We will fix it. The most important information on this is the contact information. Then some follow-up questions that you're going to be asking the tenant. Were you aware of Cleveland Right to Counsel before the hearing today? And if the person says yes, it's gonna ask a follow-up question of, is there a reason that you did not contact legal aid for representation in this case? And you should summarize that to the best of your ability. And then the next follow-up question is, how could we have better communicated with you about right to counsel? And again, just try to summarize that to the best of your ability concisely. If you click no on this, so the person didn't know that right to counsel existed prior to the hearing, it does not ask those follow-up questions. What we're trying to do here is gather information on how to best reach people because as you will see from observing the docket, many people don't show up to their eviction hearing altogether. So we're trying to gather information on, what is the most effective way that we can reach out to them. Number of people that are 18 and over. So this is essentially the adults in the household. You're gonna click, for example, let's assume it's just one person and number of people under 18. This is the children in the household. And let's assume you're gonna select 3 children and 1 adult. The family size application in this instance would be a total of 4. So what is the total number of people? And then the gross monthly income, you're gonna ask them, what is your income before, what is your income before taxes? And again, remember to dig in here, is it Social Security disability? Is it unemployment benefits? Sort of add it up and have them tell you how much their income is. And let's assume that they tell you their income is $800 a month. Once you put that in here, it's going to calculate the percentage of poverty. So in this instance, it's 36.23%. Keep in mind that right to counsel is only for people who are at 100% of the federal poverty guidelines and below. One thing I will tell you is if you see a client who is like at very, very close to 100% of the federal poverty guidelines. So let's assume that their income is, well, this doesn't even get me close, but let's just assume that the calculation here where it says percentage of poverty is close to 100% of the federal poverty guidelines. You should feel comfortable processing that case and making them eligible, because intake will get a hold of them and try to make sure, double check their income to see if they are eligible for representation. And then pre-screen notes. You'll want to get the case number to start off. So you'll hear the case, it's usually 2021 CVG something or other. So you want to get the case number. If you can, and you can catch the name of the opposing attorney, that would be helpful too, but not necessary. But most importantly, you want to capture here when the court has continued the case till. And I'll talk about that in a second, but this is where you would put that information in. So if you've gone through this process and you know that the person has a child in the household, that their percentage of poverty is below 100%, you are going to select RTC pending review. Be very careful here that it's not just pending review. You have to select RTC pending review. And that is what will generate for us to give this person a call and let them know that we are going to be contacting them to complete the intake process more fully. If the person is not eligible because, maybe they did have a child in the household, but they're way over the 100% of the federal poverty guidelines, you are going to select reject. And it will not generate a full intake on our part. A couple of things to keep in mind. You're gonna want to advise, I'm gonna stop sharing here. But you're gonna want to advise the person once you've gone through that process that we just talked about with them. You're gonna want to tell them, okay, it seems like you're eligible. So I need you to go back to your Zoom room and ask the court and tell the court that you've done the screening and that you'd like an opportunity to contact legal aid. What will happen at that point is the court will give them a 1-week continuance, and we will reach out to them to try to finalize the intake and assign them an attorney. You need to tell the tenant, it's really important that you answer the phone when legal aid calls you. If the tenant seems to imply that they have a difficult time, they're going to be at work and they're not going to be able to answer the phone, for example, try to capture a time that they would be available and our intake will try to call them then. But you need to make sure that you tell them that they need to go back into the Zoom room to ask for that continuance. You should not ask the continuance on their behalf. You don't want to engage in the unauthorized practice of law. So don't ask on their behalf. But if the court might inquire of you whether or not they were eligible, and at that point you can direct your comments to the court by saying, yes, Your Honor, it appears that the tenant is eligible for right to counsel, but you don't want to ask for the continuance on behalf of the tenant. If the tenant is not eligible for right to counsel, but they are, below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines and they have a compelling case, you can still instruct the tenant to call the general legal aid phone number, which we will provide for you in a cheat sheet after this, after you've watched this video. And again, it doesn't mean that the tenant might still continue with their hearing that day, but you can still give them legal aid's general information. One other thing to keep in mind is if the tenant wants to actively reach out to us after they've gotten that continuance, we do have that specific right to counsel number that we shared. And again, that's the numbers to give them. We will provide you all of this information in a cheat sheet so that you have it in front of you as you're going through this process. But really what we're trying to accomplish is, reaching the people that they did not contact us prior to their hearing, but that are eligible for right to counsel, and getting their contact information, getting the court to give them a continuance, so that then we can go through the process of assigning them an attorney. So that's kind of the critical piece of the puzzle that you all are paying at this junction of the person's case. So I'm gonna stop there and see if did I miss anything, Lauren?
No, I think the only thing I was, maybe you mentioned it, but just again, I think it would be helpful. What are we asking time commitment wise? Like how many days a week and how long are the time commitments typically on those days?
Yeah, so generally the dockets will run between 9 and 11, usually, give or take. Lauren will be reaching out to you with scheduling. I believe that there will be an opportunity for you to sign up as to what your availability actually is. You don't have to sign up for every single day, but we do ask that when you do sign up, you allow yourself an opportunity to participate between 9 between 9 and 11, 9 and noon, because it's really difficult to schedule it for any less than that, given how the dockets are running. And so there will be an opportunity to ask a lot of these questions too at the Q&A later on this week. It's possible that we might have missed a few details, but I do think this sort of gives the general overview. Anything else, Lauren?
The only other thing I would say is, and this is what I say to anyone that is new to volunteering with legal aid, whether it be an attorney or a law student, is that you don't have to have any experience or specialized substantive knowledge about the legal issue and what we're asking you to do. Your work with us is extremely important, but we try very hard to make sure that you feel prepared and trained and supported as you're doing the work. So, I don't want anyone to be listening to this and thinking, well, I don't know anything about housing law, so this just isn't going to be a good fit for me. What you're really doing is helping clients connect with legal aid and making sure that they have representation and an eviction, which can have a huge impact on the outcome of the case without having to have any specialized knowledge about the legal issue. We are hoping that through this process, you learn a lot and you get the experience of being in the courtroom, getting to interact with magistrates, learning how to interview clients, and wanting to continue to work with legal aid. But we just want everyone to know that in the beginning, that it's normal to feel a little bit nervous. It's normal to feel a little like, I'm not sure what's going on here, but we promise that we will support you and assist you, and that we're giving you the tools and training that you need to be able to do this work.
Yeah, and I will just add, like I mentioned earlier, that there are always right to counsel attorneys on the docket, and everyone is willing to help. Lauren, who you all will be meeting at the Q&A, is a great resource. She's very responsive. Even while you're sitting on the docket, she will provide contact information for other attorneys who might be able to assist as well. So just, we know that this is new, but it really is a beneficial opportunity, especially with all of the courts still continuing to be remote. A really good opportunity to interact with the judges and with the magistrates and opposing counsel, and just an opportunity to sort of observe the way that eviction hearings are being handled. So thank you so much. We hope this was helpful and look forward to volunteering with you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.